So as I've said, this session is around the November-December window, where students will be sitting either assignments or OBEs, or a combination of the two. Okay, so the agenda, as I've alluded to previously, is we're going to, in a moment, look at the Student's Guide to Lost Learning Time. I'm just literally going to walk you through how to use this guide and how it's of use. Then I'm going to go over some of the basics for you getting your assignments and your open book exam writing correct. And then I'm going to hand over to Simon, who's going to talk to you about increasing your grade level, methods of gathering evidence and which evidence is sound evidence, avoiding academic malpractice. And then I'll finish off with a summary and leave you with some useful links. The slides will be shared towards the end of next week, I think, or maybe earlier. So you will be able to click back through anything that we show in today's presentation. I'm just going to stop sharing and reshare my other document. And so yeah. Okay, so this one is called the Centre Delivery Guide to November-December assessments. There's another document that looks very, very similar and has got the same content in, and it's geared towards students, and that's called the Lost Learning Guide. So they've got the same content in them. One's just directed at centres for their delivery, and one is directed at students. You need to only use this document for the up and coming assessment window. It'll be of no use for any windows after that. And you also need to make sure you familiarise yourself with the ABE syllabus relevant to the unit that you're taking, or the units that you're taking. And it's useful also to have the ABE study guides for those given units open. Okay, so whether you're looking at the Centre Delivery Guide or the Student Lost Learning Guide, this part will look the same. So it will show you the level and the units. So for level 3, we only have one unit, and that's the Business Essentials unit. And this one's set up slightly differently to the level 4, 5 and 6 unit questions. So if I just go through the level 3 one for those that are thinking of taking this unit, you'll see that there are 6 questions. In terms of the criteria and assessment areas, you'll see that actually question 1 relates to learning outcome 1 in the syllabus, question 2 to learning outcome 2, as does question 3, and then question 4 relates to learning outcome 3. Question 5 and 6 relate to learning outcome 4. Then if you see the next column, it breaks that down a bit further. So it talks about the individual assessment criteria within those learning outcomes. So you'll need the syllabus, because the syllabus will show you in detail the indicative content that's covered by those criteria. You'll also see a marks per question column in this document. So anything that carries a high number of marks, like question 1, you'll need to write more words for the answer of question 1 and give a detailed answer there to pick up the maximum marks. So do look at questions and the amount of marks allocated, and avoid going over the overall word count that's highlighted on the front of your assignment or open book exam. If we just take a little look then at a level 4 unit to see how that differs. So for UDBE, dynamic and business environments, you'll see here that there's only 4 questions, and that question 1 links to learning outcome 1, but in particular 1.4 assessment criteria. Question 2 relates to learning outcome 2, 2.2 assessment criteria, and question 3 to learning outcome 3, 3.2 criteria, and question 4, learning outcome 4, and 4.1 assessment criteria. You will actually then see by looking across how many marks each of these questions will pick up. So clearly question 3 and 4 pick up the bulk of the marks. So they're the questions you'll want to be focusing your time on and giving more detailed answers to. If it's an OBE, there will be a word count indicator for each of the questions. If it's an assignment, there'll just be an overall word count. So if there's an overall word count, use the marks as your guide to decide how much you're going to write for each given answer. Now, one thing to stress with this is that although we're giving you specific criteria for the questions and what they relate to pick up the higher marks, and Simon will go into this in more detail further on, you will need to kind of read around the subject more, and you will need to be familiar with the whole learning outcome that the question relates to. So the reason we're giving you a bit more focus is that if you can't actually manage to study the syllabus in its entirety, then you can look at different learning outcomes and focus your study in a more sort of directed way. But that said, if you want to reach the higher marks and the sort of upper grades, like the merits and the distinction, your answer will need to reference other elements of the content. So this document literally lists every unit that is up for assessment and highlights the marks that are given and the areas of the syllabus that are covered. So it's a useful resource. As I've said, it's there to assist you, but the main information we're giving is where possible, you need to study the whole syllabus, because that's what will get you the bigger marks overall. But this is just there to assist and to guide you to make sure you are focusing on the right areas. Just going to go back to the slides now. Okay. Just put that, okay, on slideshow. So that's the student guide to lost learning. I showed you the centre guide, but they've basically got the same content in there. Okay, so getting the basics right then. Last year we did a session that was carried out by one of our academic team, Carrie Foster, and Carrie covered a whole host of things. It was a very long session lasting almost 3 hours, which we then broke down into sort of snapshot videos that are still available on YouTube. So a lot of the content that myself and Simon are going to present was presented by Carrie in a much larger session. And that was writing a great assignment or OBE session. So this is a bit of repetition, but you can never go over this information enough, and you should always think about these things before you start writing an assignment or an open book exam. So first of all, jumped ahead. First of all, both assignments and open book exams require you to pick a business and write an organisational summary. Now, the reason for this is that at ABE, we don't want to just produce students that have a wealth of knowledge and understanding. We actually want students to study our qualifications, but also feel they can apply the knowledge that they've learned in a given situation or to the business environment that they're in. So for all of our open book style assessments, which are both assignments and our open book exams, we like you to pick an organisational summary, an organisation, and write a summary about them. And then when you're answering the questions, you need to think about that organisation you've chosen and reference them in your answers, because that gives you the application side of your knowledge. Now, it may sound harsh, bullet point number 1, but you will fail if you fail to give us an organisational summary, and that will be noted by a 0 mark. So make sure you do it. The word count isn't part of the overall word count, but we do expect to see at least 200 words. And we've been really, really clear around what needs to be included. So all the bullet points there highlight the key areas that need to be included in your organisational summary. And it's really, really useful because it helps the marker understand the context of your answers as well. And it helps you because you can then show that not only have you studied the knowledge, but you actually know how to apply that knowledge to a business situation. And that's one of the reasons that ABE students are so successful in the workplace, because they take their knowledge, but they've already applied it when they've taken their assessments. And so when they come into the workplace, they're a lot more capable. The next thing to think about is the word count. Now we've circled there in red that word count, and this is an example of the front of one of the assignments. You'll see on the front of an assignment or an OBE the overall word count. In the OBE template, there'll also be a reminder of the word count per question. That isn't the case in the assignments. It's an overall word count. And so for assignments, you'll need to think about how many marks does each task give me? And those marks indicate the amount of the overall words you'll need to use. If you write more than the word count, we give you a 10% tolerance. So you can go over by 10%, it's 300 words, or you can go under by 10%. If you go any less, the chances are you'll struggle to pass, or you'll only meet a pass. You won't have written enough to get the higher grades. If you go on and on and on and present 5,000 words, the marker will stop marking at 3,000. So even if you've written some really excellent stuff in the other 2,000 words, it won't get read and it won't get marked. So it's a waste of your time. This is about you being able to answer a task or a question in a concise manner and answer the question efficiently, rather than just theory dump every bit of theory that you've learned. So you really need to read the question and make sure you're not overusing the word count. To do this and be sure and not worry that you've gone over the word count, we would advise that you write it in a Word document first if you can, because there's a function there where you can check the number of words and then save it to a PDF. For our markers, they have a set amount of pages that they know X amount of words will fit onto. And therefore, once it starts to exceed that page count, if it's of a certain font size, they will stop marking. So don't think because you're sending it in PDF that the markers aren't aware of the amount of words that you're writing. They are able to work it out. So please don't write over and don't write too far under the word count. In terms of appendices, these don't count as part of your word count, and we will be removing these from next year. We've found that a lot of the appendices that have been sent in to date are not particularly relevant to the content and are just added in just in case. If you really feel the need to add in appendices, then make sure they're relevant and make sure you reference them correctly in the body of your answer to the task or the question. But if in doubt, I would leave them out because they're not really required. You should be able to answer the question without having to reference them overall. That said, you won't get marked down if you include appendices for this particular window. So don't worry about it, but only use them if they're really, really relevant. Okay. So I've talked about this a little bit already, and it's allocating word count by grade or mark. So a good way to look at it is if the task is worth 10 marks, only allocate 10% of your word count to it. Have a look at the amount of marks and make sure that when you look at your answers overall, when you've finished, that the word count looks like it's in sync with the amount of marks that you'll get. Now, if you're doing an open book exam, we do help you with that. And for each question, there is a guide to the amount of words that you need to answer each question. But for assignments, because they are slightly larger in terms of the amount of word count that you need to do, and there's tasks that interrelate, you really need to look at the marks to work out how many words do I need to write for this. Okay, now this one sounds obvious, but it's amazing how many people fall foul of this. So you need to read the question and also follow the instructions. So at the front of every assignment or open book exam, there is a page full of instructions. Don't skim over this. Take your time to read it. It clearly states there about your organisational summary and what you need to include. So don't skip over it. Make sure you include it. Certain units as well may reference things like choosing a project and making sure that that project runs over 6 months. Some units may ask you to include things like a CV or some PowerPoint slides. They may not, but they may do. So read the instructions and make sure you include what you're asked to include, and don't include things you're not asked to include. Then we get down to the questions themselves. So make sure you read the question and understand what it's asking. The command word is really, really important. So the question might start explain or describe or evaluate or critically analyze. Take note of the command word because that gives you a steer as to how you need to answer the question. Further on in the presentation, there's a link to our command words document, and I would say have a look at that before you start writing your assignment or your open book exam, because it gives you detail of what each of those command words is looking for. So you'll know that when you see those command words in a question, the kind of angle the question it is steering towards. That will also help you avoid just dumping theory in. So if you need to describe a theory or explain a theory, then we would expect you to put information about theory in there. But if a question asked you to critically analyze X theory with Y theory and how that relates to your organisation of choice, then we're not asking you to tell us about that theory. We're asking you to critically analyse how that theory relates to your business of choice. And in that instance, you wouldn't need to tell us all about that theory. You would assume that the marker knows the theory and is actually assessing you on how you critically analyse that theory in relation to your organisation of choice. So it's really, really important you read the question and follow the instructions, because often you can write a whole host of information, but it's a pure theory dump and it doesn't actually answer the question. So really look at that and focus on that. The application of context as well. This is really important, and this is, as I've said, why we asked you for an organisational summary and why in the questions we say in relation to your chosen organisation or an organisation of your choice. So there it says at bullet point 2 what I've just previously said, that this means taking a theory and thinking about how it applies to your organisation rather than just talking about a theory. So it's about, you know, the theory, the concept, the framework. Is it true? Does it fit with your chosen organisation? Is it something that works for the organisation that you've chosen, or do you disagree with it? And is there another theory, concept or framework that actually is more relevant? So it's about you using the knowledge and understanding and applying it to your chosen organisation. I've already mentioned the word theory dump. It's something that our markers look for a lot. And so whilst you may think, I've really done well in that question, I've told them all about Porter's 5 forces, or, you know, 14 principles of management, you might think you have smashed it. But if the question doesn't ask you to describe or explain a particular theory, and you've spent 600 of your 700 words describing or explaining a theory, then you won't get many marks for it, because it's not what the question's asked you to do. So again, that goes back to looking at the command word and making sure that you answer the question that you've been asked, and you don't just go, this is about this theory, I'm going to tell them everything I know, because it's not always required. Okay, so again, can't emphasize enough the importance of you reading and understanding the command word at the beginning of the question, and often within the question. Okay, I think I've said enough about command words throughout the presentation. There is a link there, and these slides will be shared, but you can find this link on our website, and the command words document is on the portal as well. So you should be able to find this document really easily. And as I said, before you start writing up any of your, sorry about that, any of your theories, any of your answers to your questions, you should make sure you've had a look at this document and you really understand the command words, because then it will help you know how to answer the question. Okay, that's my bit over for now. I'm going to be quiet now, and I'm going to hand over to Simon, that's going to go through the next part of this session. Thanks, Simon.
Okay, thank you, Vicky. So, as Vicky has said, this section is going to be looking at some ways in which you can increase your grade level. We're also going to be talking about evidence sources and the evaluation of evidence, and then coming on to my favorite topic, which is avoiding academic malpractice. But if we have a look at grading criteria first of all, so yes, this slide. In each syllabus for each unit, you'll find that there is a set of grading criteria which differentiate what we expect to see in each of the bands of attainment that the unit has to offer. So the first hurdle, if you like, or the first goal that you're aiming towards is to get at least a pass mark, and a pass mark in every unit is 40%. But there are gradations of achievement above that. So merit kicks in at 55% and a distinction at 70%. So here we've done a quick run through of how you can approach a particular topic with suggestions on what will be awarded the largest amount of marks in relation to how you approach the question. At the very least, so we've taken the coronavirus pandemic as an example here, and in the first criteria, grading criteria, it's less than a pass, so between 0 and 39. As Vicky says, you can be awarded a 0 if you don't fulfill one key instruction, which is not to provide a company summary. You can also get a 0 mark if you don't actually answer the questions. So be very mindful about what the question is actually asking you to do. So here we've said, well, a very simple statement, there was a virus, and it may well be that a learner will go on to describe the history of the virus, the history of the pandemic, and how it became manifest. Avoid, if you can, as a parallel to avoiding theory dumps, is to avoid long passages of description, particularly if the command word, as Vicky said, does not ask for this, because it's a distraction, and it might, while it might show a considerable amount of knowledge about a specific topic, if it's not actually directly related to the question, then it's not going to get you very high marks. We can then move on to something which is perhaps a bit more descriptive. So there was a pandemic, it was caused by a virus, and many hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people have become sick and have died prematurely, unfortunately. That might be enough within the context of the question to barely scrape a pass at 40. But what we're really looking for is using frameworks and analytical tools in order to explain how the virus, in this case, developed around the world, and to think about its relationship to key economic and social interaction and topics such as globalization and so forth. So to get some evaluation into uh, your response to a question on this topic could be that there was a global pandemic caused by a virus called COVID-19. A lot of people got sick and prematurely died, and this is what governments and non-governmental agencies around the world are doing about it. There is some evaluation, some interest and demonstration of cause and effect. Really, to develop this, we're looking sort of between high pass and a merit mark. The risk of a global pandemic was predicted, which is quite true. COVID-19 is part of a family of viruses which have mutated over hundreds of thousands of years. The common cold is part of the COVID-19 family. They're highly infectious particularly to populations that have not developed immunity or are not vaccinated. You can talk about the R rate. The R rate is a measurement of infectiveness or infection. Where it is above 1, then infections can be exponential. More critical analysis is to say that a dynamic global economy and high transmission rates were caused the rapid spread of a highly infectious disease. This is certainly true, that wherever you think the virus originated, it was transmitted through global interaction of companies, people, and populations, and so making it very, very difficult to isolate. And then you can add some original analysis of your own by saying, for example, that even when vaccinated, global populations are not necessarily going to be immune from future pandemics. And that actually that there are wider implications, such as tackling poverty, investment in public health, and so forth, and a general carefulness about how large groups of people meet together locally, and looking at ways in which transmission rates can be prevented globally. So the essence of this is really to have a look at going back to the very useful advice that Vicky gave, which is to have a look at the command words and think about the context. That what we're looking for is frameworks used, and particularly the company situation that you might find that you brought to bear as evidence, in order to explain how cause and effect operate, and also looking at wider implications of company action. Now, in order to do this, next slide, please, Vicky. In fact, the one after that. So thank you. So what we're looking at is gathering evidence, and I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about the types of sources that we recommend that you focus on. And we've divided this slide into a left and right hand side. The guidance that we give is that start with the ABE study guide. You'll find these on the portal. There's one per unit, and in it you will find summaries of the key theories that relate to the subject matter, and very useful starting point bibliographies, and start using those, the key texts, to understand the theoretical underpinnings of the subject that the unit is focusing on. Academic journals from open source, Google Scholar, or the websites of the journals concerned, if you're aware. So like the Harvard Business Review, for example, some of them publish free samples of particular journal articles which you can access. And then you've got various other sources, particularly magazines or publications that are issued by industries, whether local trade associations or international trade associations, publish reports and research, particularly by organizations and what we call NGOs, so non-governmental organizations, whether they are in-country or international. Publish reports, for example, the World Bank, the OECD, UNESCO, and so forth. They publish research into country reports, but also into industry and trend reports. Look also at the organisation that you've chosen and whatever publications they might do, publications of R&D, annual reports, annual accounts, those sorts of things, and look at them over a series of years to see how your organisation has prospered, or perhaps not, as a result of conducting normal competition within its business environment. And then have a look at textbooks and academic books. Particularly, we're keen that you focus on these rather than, say, Wikipedia. I know Wikipedia is a good starting point. I mean, it's on the right-hand side, largely because it's open source and it's editable by almost anybody, and so consequently, you have to sometimes take some of the information that's in Wikipedia with a degree of skepticism. Similarly, other digital platforms like Facebook and so forth. Be wary of what you might call out-of-date materials, so anything published over 10 years ago, but we'll come on to some caveats a little bit later on. And anything that's sort of research without printing sources, those which particularly might, for example, have a particular agenda or axe to grind, which means that they're pushing a particular line or are assertive without those assertions necessarily being backed up by firm evidence. Next slide, please. So one of the key questions that you should be looking at is to consider how reliable your source actually is. So what are the qualifications of the author? Again, are the sources listed? Does it have a reference list or bibliography? Is it peer reviewed? The academic journals base their authoritativeness on the basis that when articles or journal pieces, research pieces are submitted to journals, then they are peer reviewed by other experts in the field prior to publication. So, which is not necessarily to act as a suppression of new ideas, but it is a process by which what you might call howlers are ironed out prior to publication. Is the writing objective? Is it balanced? Is it looking to prove or disprove or refute a hypothesis? And then think about who the target audience is. Most academic journals, for example, are in many ways aimed at other practitioners, professionals, in other words, as much as they are students. And so sometimes they can go into very arcane detail about the nuts and bolts of a specific topic, whereas other journals are more what you might call populist in that they're writing for a lay public, so the interested amateur, as it were. And as a student, you sometimes have to negotiate your way through both of these objectives, because you may find that the lay public is not related journals are not specific enough, but the professionally focused journals are too academic and too technical. So you have to exercise a little bit of judgment there. And then, what is the purpose of the source? When was it published? However, it's worth noting that certain seminal texts, can be quite old. One of our favourite examples is if you're involved in project management, for example, there is something called a critical path analysis, various tools called a critical path analysis, and the other one is a Gantt chart, which is essentially breaking a project down into its constituent parts with roles and responsibilities, interconnectivities, and timelines by which a project is due to be completed. Andrew Gantt was an American sociologist who published this particular tool in 1911. So it's something that's been around for over 100 years. And economics as a subject, has really sprung from key texts from economists like Adam Smith, for example, who published his Inquiry into the Wealth of Nations in the 1770s. So, and some of his theories, particularly with regard to the division of labour, are still quoted and built upon today. Next slide, please, Vicky. So, looking at the source material, what we're suggesting here is that you read in order to acquire evidence, and also give you some tools and some perspective about how to evaluate the effectiveness of the evidence. So think about, in either a journal or an article or a study, think about what the main purpose of the article is. Why have they written it? What's the point of the argument? What are the key questions that the author is addressing? And think about how these actually relate to any assignment or OBE question that you're hoping to answer. But identify the key questions in the mind of the author or authors when they wrote the article. What's the most important information? So what are the data sources that a practitioner or an article writer is aiming to base their findings on? So facts, observations, data, and the quantitativeness of the data is going to be a key factor in its reliability. So what are the main inferences and conclusions? And does the data that has been provided as supporting the particular argument, does it actually do that? Is the author guilty, for example, of setting up what we call a straw man, so a non-problem, in order to be able to refute it or break it down particularly easily? So, and if we take the line of reasoning from the author seriously, what are the implications? What do we take from this, and how can it be applied in other particular situations? Next slide, please, Vicky. So one of our main principal conclusions is that it's not a question of just quoting, but to synthesize, demonstrate that when you're answering a question, that you actually fully understand what the author is actually saying. And what we're really looking for in terms of the higher marks that we are able to award is a sense that you have a particular argument which is very specific and germane to the evidence that you have collected. So in other words, that we're looking for your voice rather than a simple replication of the voice of those who have come before you. So support your point or statement by incorporating ideas of your own, presenting new ideas, involving more than one source, compare different material. So XYZ author has said this, but ABC author says this, and then make an evaluation balance as to whether the second author is either complementing or taking off into a new direction the work that has been done by the other author. So highlighting the similarities and the differences, and making connections between the different sources. So synthesis is really important, and it segues into the next section that we're going to be talking about, which is about academic malpractice. Next slide, Vicky. So avoiding academic malpractice. So what is academic malpractice, first of all? So next slide after that, please, Vicky. That essentially what we're looking at is three things. So plagiarism, which is the unattributed copying of work conducted by other people. Collusion, which is where two or more people get together to pass off a similar piece of work as their own. And the third one is what we call poor academic practice, where there is not really as much control over the academic materials that are presented in a study as there could be. So if we look at plagiarism, first of all, it's very important that you cite and you reference the work that belongs to other people that you're basing your arguments on as clearly and concisely as possible. Copying and pasting, whether it's from published work or very commonly from websites or from other ABE learners, that's also very common as well. Just don't do it. And it relates back to the point that we were making earlier about synthesis, that if you can synthesize other ideas or ideas that have been promoted and explained by other people in your words, then you're less likely to be pulled up for plagiarism, because we do check for this within an anti-plagiarism software system called Turnitin. And this is something that we sample a lot of units, and we sample a considerable proportion of learners' work. To help with citations and referencing, we do publish on the portal a guide to referencing. We use what's called the Harvard system, which consists usually of the author's surname. So we've got an example here, Hackman, with the year 2002. And then if you're able to provide this, the page numbers and the publication location, in this case, Boston, Massachusetts. Next slide, please, Vicky. Now, Collusion, talking about Turnitin, one of the things that Turnitin is actually very, very useful at doing is highlighting where learners have come together to present very often what is a third party's work as their own, and think that they're able to do this by changing the name of the company that forms the basis of the study, and that's going to protect them. The trouble is, unless you actually change everything within the structure, and particularly if it's something, a piece of work which has been derived from a learner who has already submitted an answer for the same unit, then Turnitin will not only be able to show which that two learners or more have colluded, but can also identify the piece of work that from the ABE student that has been used as the source base. So this is something that comes across very, very quickly, and also we use our marker team to identify whether submissions look very similar in terms of tone, structure, word association, and so forth. And this I guarantee you will be discovered. So as general rules about this, don't let others read your work. Don't give or sell somebody else an answer that you've already provided and for an assignment that you passed, which looks very similar in terms of the questions that are being asked, and particularly don't do the work for somebody else. Next slide, please. So poor academic practice, or PAP, as we describe it, is a case sometimes where you get low-level duplication with citations, but still are pointed out in the Turnitin system as having what they call quite a high match score percentage. Now, it may be that this is either by error or carelessness, and that you presented the work in all good faith and didn't intend to cheat. However, we can't use the system. The system is not designed. The software plagiarism system is not designed to determine motivation. All it will do is it will point out the level of similarity to other published work. So that being the case, we do presume that because the match score is high, that actually, you know, there are penalties associated with that. And we have for each level not only for what we call the headline rate, so the amount of percentage that you're actually allowed after allowable exclusions, so those parts of an assignment or an OBE which don't fall within the word count, such as the organisational summary, the cover sheet, and the references, and any appendices you might supply. Then it's and then also with the single source and the combined top 5 single sources within any match score, it may well be that the result that you get is that it's in excess or on the cusp. So where it's on the cusp, so in other words is borderline, then we may class your work as poor academic practice because your referencing is not as tight as it should be. And regardless of how effective your work is academically, so in other words, it might be marked within a merit or even a distinction category. If it fails the copy test and is, the referencing is poor, then it will be capped at a pass. So do make sure that you have complete control over your materials. So at this point, I would like to thank you for your time, and I will hand over to Vicky to do the summary.
Thanks, Simon. Okay, so in summary to what what we've covered so far, we haven't actually brought up the ABE way, but I think this is a good point to start the summary with. You'll notice that a few months ago, we launched this, and you'll see it on our website. And it's really a kind of set of principles. And these have been developed from our experience during the pandemic, of the way that our students and centres have conducted themselves and how they've kind of continued on and not let something like COVID-19 stop them in their academic journey. So the areas we've talked about today are really around the principle of acting with integrity. We don't assume that any of our students would knowingly cheat, but the information that Simon has supplied you with today will hopefully help you avoid academic malpractice moving forwards. We also like to support our students and our centres, so by providing sessions like these prior to a window, we hope you'll find them of use, and if they are useful, it may be something we can continue with in the future to act as a support. The other tips that we've got here, obviously, and one that's probably come through loud and clear, is to answer the question that's in front of you. And by that, we mean to respond to the command word and not just do a theory dump, as we've talked about, both myself and Simon throughout this presentation. Keep to the point and try not to waffle. So if you're not really sure, you need to go back and do a bit more research. These are open books, so you've either got assignments or open book exams. And whilst research does take the bulk of the time in your preparation, don't waffle on, think, oh, if I'm going off the point, do I need to go back and do a bit more research around this one in order to give it a better answer? And on research, we haven't really touched on that today, but don't think, oh, I need to get on with writing my answers and rush. You need to spend a good percentage of the time doing your research in order to answer the questions. So we release the assignments, we give you slightly longer than we do for the open book exams. And the reason for that is because we expect you to spend the first part of those weeks doing all the research and collecting all your evidence and all your valuable sources that Simon's been over in today's presentation, to then go and answer the questions. So do spend time researching, don't feel that it's a waste of time. We can't express this one enough, keep to the word limit. Past the word limit, we won't mark it, and you could, end up with a pass or worse, because you've just put too much information in there, and the stuff that did come first, wasn't relevant to answer the question. So be concise, answer the question, don't go over the word limit. Make sure your references are there's enough quantity. There isn't a set amount of references that you need to give, but if you're quoting and you're synthesizing and you're comparing, then you'll be comparing to something. Could be a study, could be a theory. Make sure you reference it within your text, and you do a reference section at the end of your open book exam or assignment. The reference section doesn't count in your word count, so don't feel that you can't add that in. It's very important. Make sure it's quality referencing. Use our guide. As Simon's already said, we use the Harvard referencing method. Simon's described this part quite well, quite in detail, about synthesizing your materials. So this is all about demonstrating your understanding. So where a question asks you to relate it to your chosen organisation, you need to look at the different references you might be using, the different comparative texts you might be using, and make sure they're synthesized in your answer. Answer the what and why, but the what's really important. So again, it's going back to what's the question actually asking you to do. Don't get trapped into just theory dumping. And then last of all, avoid academic malpractice. If you're caught doing this, and you will get caught doing this because we have a really, really good system and robust system in place, you will fail and you will get a 1 mark. Your centre will have some set rules around this. And should you get caught with academic malpractice on more than one occasion, your centre may not allow you to finish a qualification and may sanction you for that. So just, avoid this at all costs. We don't want anybody getting caught out by academic malpractice. Okay. Useful links, then there's a link here to the command words, and as I said, these slides will be sent round so that you can access them after this session. We have study tips on our website. I mentioned right at the beginning of this, the session delivered by Carrie Foster, the guide to writing a great assignment and OBE. You'll see a lot of the material we've used today presented by Carrie and in greater detail as well. And that's broken down into useful bite-sized chunks. So there's a chunk on command words, there's a chunk on referencing. So you may find that easier than reading through the guides. And then a reminder about the ABE way, where you can find those principles on our website. So I've acknowledged that obviously Carrie Foster, who's not part of this delivery team today, did have a huge input into this presentation, and you can watch her wider presentation, as I've just said, on Facebook as a means of preparation if you feel like you need further support on this. So we're going to move on to questions. I can see there are some chat questions, and I've also got one come through from Facebook. So the one from Facebook is, in an exam such as effective financial management, should workings be done in an appendix? Well, for this particular diet of assessments, the financial management units are open book exam, and there aren't really any workings out required for this. They're more descriptive answers and more applying effective financial management theory to your chosen organisation. So there shouldn't be a need for that. If there is a need for it, I would say just put it into the body of your answer rather than as an appendix if it's relevant. But for open book exam versions of this unit, it's probably not relevant for this round. Just going to see what's in the chat. Okay, Linda will send round an email and a link to the slides so that you'll be able to get those. I don't actually know where they'll appear. They'll probably appear on our website and be uploaded to the portal, but there will be a message that goes out after we've delivered all of these sessions, so you will be able to get a copy of the slides. This is being recorded. It's being streamed live on Facebook, and the Zoom meeting has been recorded as well. And Linda will be resharing those on Facebook and resharing the recordings as well. So they will go round. And that looks like it's all of the questions about copies of the slide and and where I can get a recording of this session. So that will follow. Look out on Facebook and look out for emails and links on our website to these sessions. And if you still can't find them, just drop us an email at ABE and we'll send you back the link. But you should be able to find them. We've got one more session this afternoon, and then we've completed the sessions for this round, so they'll be going out after all are completed. Thank you for your time and your attendance, and I hope this session has been of use. And lastly, good luck in the November-December assessment window. Thanks a lot. Bye.